Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Minnesota Democracy Cup. We're so glad you're joining us today. If you could just take a moment to please introduce yourself, your name, your pronouns, which college or university you're from in the chat if you haven't done so already. Well, my name is Mike Dean. I'm the Executive Director here at LeadMN. I'd like to thank our co-sponsors for their assistance in making today possible. Many thanks to the Minnesota Secretary of State's Office, the All-In Campus Democracy Challenge, Students United, the University of Minnesota Student Association, the Minnesota Private College Council, and Minnesota Campus Compact. We're gathered to honor and celebrate the work of students, staff, faculty, administrators, and other voting advocates from across the state who contribute to Minnesota's extraordinary 2020 student voter rate. It's my great honor to introduce our first speaker, Secretary of State Steve Simon, who's going to kick things off today. Secretary Simon is a champion of student voting, is a strong advocate for increasing access to the ballot box for all voters. Please join me in a virtual round of applause for Secretary of State Steve Simon.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks everyone for having me. I really appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here and to see all of this come to fruition. I want to just start out with a great big giant thank you to everyone who has been part of Democracy Cup and its predecessor efforts as well. Our office has been thrilled to work with you on these. And I want to thank you in particular for 2020. 2020 was a hard year, just period. All of us had our lives turned upside down. COVID-19 affected our lives. It affected our health. It affected our schools. It affected our families, and it affected our democracy as well. There was no playbook. There was no rule book. There was no template for how to do this kind of stuff, how to get people engaged and active in voting. We had to really figure it out. We had to adapt. We had to pivot. All of us did in so many ways in our daily lives. And you all on this call and on this meeting did so in grand fashion. I'm proud to say that when the dust settled after the 2020 election, Minnesota, for the third time in a row, #1 in America in voter turnout. And there's a reason for that. I don't think it's an accident. It's not dumb luck. It's not a coincidence. It has to do with strong laws that we have on the books, although they could be better. And it has to do with a culture of civic participation and voting that many of you are personally responsible for. You have nurtured it, you have sustained it, you have passed it along. Now, Minnesota is particularly strong when it comes to students voting. And that, again, is something that you all own a piece of, a big piece of. So I'm sure we'll hear more statistics. I don't want to give away the game here about what the actual numbers were, but suffice it to say, Minnesota has done very well and has been very strong when it comes to student voting. And that is in no small part to your efforts. I know that there's more work to do. We all do. Even though we were #1 in the country at just under 80%, that means about 20% of Minnesotans overall who are eligible to vote are not voting. And that means that though we are proud of being #1, we have to keep pushing the outside of the envelope. We have to keep forging ahead. We have to keep organizing. We have to keep having conversations one by one with people all over the state, including and especially students at institutions all over Minnesota. There's work to be done, but I can think of no better people to do it than all of you on this call who have worked so hard and built something so very special. And I know we'll continue to do great work. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Secretary Simon. Next, I'd like to transition into our keynote video, which highlights the Ask Every Student framework. It was especially challenging for students to participate in the 2020 election. From remote learning to remote voting, there were a number of barriers that new voters had to overcome. Yet, we saw a 16-point increase in student voter turnout on college and university campuses, according to data released last month from the National Study for Learning, Voting, and Engagement. That was higher than the youth vote increase and higher than the overall voting increase. This year, student voting rates were on par with general voter turnout rates, busting the myth that students are apathetic about elections. There are many reasons why student voter turnout was so high this year. Many students were energized and mobilized around issues like gun control, climate change, and racial justice. While activism plays a significant role in increasing voter turnout, there's another reason for the boost that has received less attention. That is, the work of colleges and universities in fulfilling their role in educating for democracy. This is something that the Truman Commission back in 1947 said should come first among the principal goals for higher education. Democratic engagement has been considered taboo in higher education because it's seen as political, but that mentality has created a democracy where citizens lack a basic understanding of how government works, have record low levels of confidence in our government, and experience record high levels of polarization, further alienating them from political participation. Higher education institutions are fighting back against this by supporting students to be civically engaged. One of the ways they're doing this is with a powerful concept called Ask Every Student. The idea is simple: have a brief one-to-one conversation with every student to identify their reasons for voting and support them through this process of registering to vote and casting a ballot. The Ask Every Student framework leverages a human-centered social design process. Each campus will identify ways to integrate voter registration into existing processes to equitably reach every student. Then campuses work to execute the strategy by recruiting and training individuals to facilitate inclusive, nonpartisan conversations through which they can register students to vote and help them make a plan to cast a ballot. And finally, they integrate this work into operations of the institution by creating a sustainable and equitable and inclusive campus voting coalitions and having senior leadership actively commit to full student voter participation. This work must happen year-round and during non-election years. This is not a one-size-fits-all approach, but a framework that colleges and universities can use to adapt to the nuances of your campus community and culture. According to data from Circle, young people that are asked to vote are much more likely to go out and vote, yet only half of young people report that they were contacted. Let's work together to make sure that every student is asked to be an active participant in our democracy. Now I'm going to pass it over to Jocelyn to learn from some of the campuses that have implemented the Ask Every Student framework.
Thanks, Mike. Campuses across the nation have implemented the Ask Every Student initiative and seen substantial increases in turnout. I had the privilege of interviewing some of the staff, students, and faculty members at these institutions to find out what made them so successful, and a few key themes arose. First, one aspect of the Ask Every Student framework is integrating voter registration into existing campus processes. Here's how a few campuses were able to meet students where they were, even during the global pandemic.
The way we did it on our campus is by using the RAs, the residence assistants, because they have the most constant contact with students on campus, right? And they have the most, widespread contact with students on campus. So they were trained to register their residents to vote, and we were able to pay them to do that.
When students got their acceptance packages, they received a little pamphlet on voter engagement. We worked with the orientation and student leadership and engagement department to embed online curriculum modules on civic engagement and voting that every student has to complete before moving on to the next part of their training before they can get onto campus.
So when every student was at home having to use Canvas to log in to access their courses, they saw for an entire week during National Voter Registration Week the information about what they needed to do to register, update their voter registration, what to do if they were displaced during the pandemic, and direct links to register to vote. We also had an opportunity to partner with our athletics department in a much greater way, and 100% of our student athletes, led by two student athletes, registered to vote. They trained and built cohorts of other student athlete peers in different teams to register and educate about voting. And they went around to all the different teams and asked during practice, went to coaches were on board. And we also combined that with substantive programming with candidates running for office and other experts to, it wasn't just about voting, but being more informed voters and being able to see competing visions and means for then connecting what students care about to political participation.
I don't care where they are, whether they're in the residence halls, whether they're on the football field, whether they're in band practice, wherever they are. I take my voter registration forms and I go to them so that they won't have any excuses, and neither will I as to why our students were not registered to vote.
From the residence halls and orientation programs to academic portals to the football fields and club meetings, Voter registration was everywhere on these campuses. A second key theme that arose was the importance of grounding voter engagement work in the mission of the college or university.
I think the idea of reaching every student, asking every student to become a voter is really important and central to the public education mission of universities, of college campuses and universities across the country.
I wouldn't have this as a main focus if I didn't have civic engagement as the foundation. How do we build service learning projects back in the classroom? How do we help faculty see their role in preparing our students to be better citizens in our society? That's what we're missing. I mean, look what's happening in the world right now. It's the worst, in my opinion, it's ever been. And that's because our citizens don't understand the big picture. They don't see each other. They don't, they can't even communicate with each other on issues. And so when we talk about that first, then understanding that getting people registered to vote, understand the responsibility of elected and understanding political leaders that make better decisions or hold them more accountable, then it just becomes an offshoot of what we do.
In order to get buy-in, you need to talk to the source. So literally having a conversation about the mission of the university and how it connects to civic engagement, whatever the school's university is and university mission. I think that's a really good tactic to make it mission-centric. If a university has a strategic plan, I think that's a good way to kind of embed it into the conversation because there's going to already be a buzz around campus about it. And then setting up those meetings with the registrar, with student leadership and engagement folks, with the orientation folks, and just letting them see the possibility in the ease by which you can embed voter registration into already existing processes and tying it to mission-centric and university values is kind of how we've done it at University of San Francisco.
Campuses also utilized resources from peer institutions and support from the Students Learn, Students Vote Coalition. In doing so, they were able to grow voter engagement and make meaningful connections at the same time.
Ask Every Student, they literally helped me build the training program for our RAs when we started doing it. I couldn't have done a lot of it without them. And most importantly, they were there, whenever there was a question, if I needed anything, all I had to do was call. They answered the phone or called right back. And I was just so happy that we had them on board.
They provide resources for multiple things. And it's been really great to be able to talk to colleagues from across the United States. So I've got lots of colleagues now that I can talk to about what's happening in my area and what works and what doesn't.
We are able to work with other students nationwide who are passionate about the same thing. And we had a lot of really cool opportunities come from that. Like I was saying, I wrote a voting accessibility guide, which got published. We were quoted in the Washington Post. There's just a lot of cool things that have come of this. And as students working with Columbia Votes, we get to use this knowledge that we've learned and kind of take it with us.
Campus's best advice? Center the students, keep it personal, and focus on connecting voting to what students care about.
If you are truly asking the students, they're going to be the ones that are going to help provide the direction for where this work needs to go on the particular campus that you have.
I love the fact that Allie and Ethan and Carolina and Anna, and Carly, the other voter registration geniuses, you guys say things I wouldn't say in the classrooms. We're strictly nonpartisan and everybody's really good about that. But we give different answers because we're different people and different age groups. When students ask things like, what about third parties? Our answers are different. And I think they get how genuine we are. And that it's super personal. The students say things that I don't even think of saying that resonate with other students.
I think if we just came in and we're like, all right, this is how you register to vote. You can put like this information onto the sheet, and like it feels like there's no substance, I think, and come from a true, genuine place. All the more just makes it like something that people want to be a part of.
Be willing to listen to students and find out what interests them, and then tailor ideas to where they're at, and get their ideas and facilitate their ideas, because they're going to be much better than anyone else in terms of being able to reach their peers.
As you heard from these campus partners, the Ask Every Student framework is a powerful way to embed a culture of voting into existing campus structures, connect political participation to the mission of your institution, and center student ideas into your civic engagement work. In 2022, LeadMN will be launching a statewide coalition to support Ask Every Student in Minnesota. 6 Minnesota colleges and universities have already become commitment campuses for the upcoming election cycle, and 3 of the 4 winners we are awarding today for having the highest campus voter turnout were Ask Every Student commitment campuses in 2020. Are you ready to join them in 2022? So for more information about Ask Every Student Initiative and how to get involved, you can visit studentvoting.org. Now we're going to hear from students who are out doing the work on their campus in the 2020 election cycle. This panel will be moderated by Manuela Hill Munoz from the University of St. Thomas and includes LeadMN's Public Relations Coordinator, Ali Tomaszek, Students United Treasurer, Pierre Young, Royce Lloyd Slifkin from Minnesota State from the Minnesota Student Association, and S.J. Welch from Hamline University. All these students were leaders on their campuses who stepped up and did some incredible organizing in 2020, despite facing extraordinary challenges.
Thank you so much, everybody. I know we're waiting to spotlight everybody. Like Michael said, my name is Manuela Hill Munoz, and I have the pleasure of working at the University of St. Thomas as the Director of Innovation, Creative Content, and Change Making. I'm very excited to be here today and to moderate this panel, and I'm looking forward to learning more about the engagement that happened for 2020 and steal some ideas for 2022. Our panel is going to be about 20 minutes. And I want to remind the panelists that as we ask you the first questions, please introduce yourself and give us a brief description of your campus so that we know a little bit about each of your experiences, as we know that each campus experience voting and voter registration differently. So COVID-19 was, and it still is, a year where it made voting and voter registration particularly challenging on our campus. What was one strategy that you found was particularly effective on your campus and how to engage students? Now I'm going to start with Rose.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rose Lloyd. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a student at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. This past year, I served as the Deputy Director of Government and Legislative Affairs of my student government. And for those who don't know, the University of Minnesota Twin Cities is very large. We're one of the largest public institutions in the country with a lot of students. So to answer your question, yes, COVID-19 did make voter engagement incredibly difficult. We were dealing with a completely virtual format where a lot of voter registration strategies were no longer able to be used for the health and safety of our campus. We didn't want to have any in-person events. So one of the main ways that we combated this was by relying on interpersonal connections that were formed already before the pandemic. So through the program that our team implemented, we recruited voter registration ambassadors from all different areas of campus and really encourage them to talk to their friends and their networks about voter registration deadlines, making sure that they knew about their polling location, and really starting to have those conversations to ensure that their friends were voters. I think that this was super beneficial, not only to us because we were able to reach more people, but it also helped students kind of build a community and have an excuse to catch up with some people that they were probably missing during the pandemic.
Thank you, Rose. SJ?
Hi, everyone. My name is S.J. Welch. I'm from Hamline University, and last year I served as an ambassador for a program we have called 90-20, where our goal in 2020 was to get 90% of our student body to come out and vote. And so that's why we're called 90-20. the pandemic was also very hard for us, but we are a little different than the U of M because Hamlin is a lot smaller. And we also were in a hybrid situation. So we had a few students on campus, we had a few students off campus. And so we really had to come together to kind of divide and conquer. And one way was to like boost our media. So we really worked on brainstorming around engaging in media and how to engage in a way that seemed very individualistic to the different types of voting that were taking place during the pandemic, because we not only had people voting in person, but we also now had higher counts of people wanting to mail in ballots, wanting to drop off ballots and stuff like that. So we had to do multiple different kind of information sessions that allowed people to engage with the type of voting that they wanted to do during, you know, a worldwide pandemic. And so that was kind of our strategy in making sure that every student felt represented enough where they kind of knew their plan for voting.
Thank you, SJ. Pierre?
Oh, hi everyone. My name is Pierre Young, and I'm a student from Metro State University. I am the treasurer of Students United. I'm serving as my first year as an officer. So prior to the pandemic at Metro State, we included like the civic engagement themes, projects in our courses, and then we created our own circles where we had to have a backup plan. So we relied heavily on social media, as we're really not a residential hall where we reach out to other students. And so we're lucky. I'm also on the Metropolitan State Student Senate, and some of my closest colleagues, they're in the Master's of Advocacy and Political Leadership program. So they're really knowledgeable on like how we can actually reach out to those students. And of course, 2020 was so difficult, how we had to realize like, we need to use these alternatives. Like, it was the first time I did mail-in voting. It was really simple and easy. It was like really like a good push of a turnout, you know, at election day, and like just kind of know like students need to know this process and how to actually get registered and then just to get out the vote.
Thank you, Pierre. Allie?
Thank you. My name is Allie. I'm the Public Relations Coordinator for the Cabinet at LeadMN. I'm also a student at North Hennepin Community College. So one strategy that I've noticed is an initiative that LeadMN has done called Class Wraps, where we attend either the first 5 minutes or the last 5 minutes of classes. Last year, it was very heavily on virtual classes. Same with this year. We had a few more classes that were in person, and being there before class starts to talk about voter engagement. But something I have found with community colleges is that a lot of students have other parts of their lives that they're participating in. School isn't the main part of their lives. A lot of people have jobs, they have kids, or in my instance, some are enrolled in other institutions as well, whether that be a trade school or a 4-year. So we've really learned that students are not as engaged on campus when they're walking around from class to class, or virtually in the classroom. So we're taking a new approach of meeting students where they're at, literally in the classroom, and asking faculty to let us participate. And something really important, we would talk about voter engagement, what's on the ballot, and other voter education. But most importantly, we would engage in interactive dialogue and really getting some answers from students about what interests them the most, what are some issues that are going on in their communities that they really care about and they want to see change, and most importantly, inspiring and empowering them to really make a difference with their voice and getting out to vote and take action with that voice. And yeah.
Thank you, Allie. I hope everybody's taking notes as I am. I love stealing some of these program names and ideas. We're going to move on to our second question. And just a reminder to our panelists that not everybody has to answer every question, so that we do want to keep being on time. So our second question is, what advice do you have for other student leaders who are interested in voter engagement? And I'm going to start with CJ.
So I think my biggest advice for other student leaders is finding what you're passionate about. I think, in our community around Hamlin and Midway, there were some really important questions on the ballot in like our recent elections, and then in the big picture of 2020, a lot of our local elections and judicial appointments were very important. And so I think the best way I feel like for faculty as well as students to engage is reminding the importance of what you're doing and being able to live in a society that gives people the power to vote is one of the most beautiful things. And so I think that putting that first and having that at the forefront of everything that you do is very important, because not only having everyone, like all the students that work for voter engagement, really have that belief, but like they're able to pass it on to the students that they come in contact with. And then it's just kind of like a domino effect. And kind of the advice that I have is just to engage with people in a way that voting is empowerment. Like never engage with them in a way that their voice, that they're just like another number, or that if they vote or if they don't vote, it doesn't matter. Like engage with them in a way that allows them to feel individually supported, individually heard. And so like Ali said, having those conversations where you're able to engage with certain issues that are around them. A lot of our students in the area are worried about rent going up because they want to stay in the area to work. And so we talked about rent stabilization and what that meant for ballot questions and stuff like that. So just remembering how important it is and what a privilege it is in our society, and engaging with people in that way.
Thank you, SJ. Pierre?
So we want to take the first step on how we can figure out who leads civic engagement. When I first got to campus at Metro State, it was pretty easy for me to find out who those people are, and it was just great to like connect with them in the student senate I was in, and just creating that personal network, and or probably your family knows, or clubs and organizations, who has a big interest in civic engagement, and I'm really, really proud of it to be engaged with my community at Metro, and just find out, how can I be a leader? Like who do I talk to? How do I get myself involved? And I'm very grateful for the people who are who inspired me to be involved in civic engagement.
Thank you. Anybody else? Ali or Rose? You can give me a wave if you're good. All right, excellent. Thank you. Okay, moving on to question number 3. What are the biggest barriers when it comes to student voting? And I'm going to start with Rose.
Thank you. So I think that a lot of schools struggle with mobilizing student voters, especially on our campus, which is so large. There are so many things to care about. If every student stopped to listen to everyone that was trying to grab their attention, they just really would not even make it to their classes. But our job is to make sure that students know that their vote is important. So it was about coming up with a very clear communication strategy that was going to motivate students to show up to the polls, and that was really going to inspire them to tell their friends about voting and tell them that student voices matter and students have the power to sway elections. And that's a message that we're still trying to push, even when it's not an election year, because it's something that if we all keep in mind, we're just going to turn out in greater numbers in future elections.
Thank you, Rose. SJ?
So at Hamlin, we've kind of seen over the last few years that as we've started to engage with media and using the platforms that the university already has in place, we've seen voter turnout skyrocket. And so kind of like a barrier that we've experienced and we've had to work through is engaging with administration in a way of allowing us to use the platforms that they have, allowing us to use their website, allowing us to use their social media platforms, and kind of coming to an agreement on how to have rhetoric that is nonpartisan around voter engagement. Because there is a fear for universities, especially around, the students that step up, and making sure that it's nonpartisan, making sure that they're not pushing for one side or the other, because they don't want to, get involved in that. And so I think one of the biggest barriers is that lack of communication between students that really want to push for voter turnout and the university being afraid of maybe some backlash. And so coming together for the common purpose, the very, very important part of education is educating students in their role in society. And so one of our barriers was kind of communicating with the university. And now we have a whole entire panel of people that meet together on our 90-20 squad that were able to kind of come up with a common narrative. We would have, check-ins with different faculty members to make sure that we're using nonpartisan language, making sure that when we connected with different campus organizations that we were connecting with those that were nonpartisan, because we both have partisan groups on campus as well. And so I felt like one of the biggest barriers as well is staff listening to students who are stepping up and saying, we understand the student culture. We understand what it means to engage with students, and staff really need to listen to that and engage with those students in a way that respects that they are a part of that culture, that they are present in that culture, and that they are engaging with their peers. And so listening to those student leaders who step up is definitely one of the things I think is most important as well.
Ali?
Yes, barrier. One big barrier that I find with student voter engagement is voter education and lack of knowledge about what is on the ballot, or what the candidates stand for, or who the candidates even are. It's one thing to get students registered and get them in the door, and it's a whole nother thing to convince them why they should vote. And that was something that blew me away this year when watching other class reps in my training and watching someone talk in a classroom. I watched an individual talk about how the election will directly impact students and how it will impact our lives in the future. And that really made a difference for me, making that genuine connection with students and saying, this impacts you. You really can make a difference in the things that are going on. Your vote matters in local elections and the larger elections as well. So really making that genuine connection with students and peer-to-peer support. A lot of the things that I have seen have been staff and administrators talking to students. So I think boosting more student engagement and peer education would help too.
Thank you, Ali. All right, I'm going to throw you a curveball and ask a question that we had not discussed previously, but I want to know, right? You all are close to graduation. Pierre, you're graduating next week. When you think about the stuff that you have learned about, right, like the voter engagement that you've done on your campuses, what are you taking with you as you move into your future endeavors? And let's start with Rose.
Yeah, so I hope to pursue a future in campaigning. So this is kind of perfectly aligning with what I'm interested in. I think that doing this kind of work has really taught me how to talk to people and what motivates them to show up at the polls, which is something that's going to be super important for me in my future career. I think just getting more experience talking to voters, seeing where their values lie, and then especially talking to young voters, which make up such an important part of voters.
Here.
So I've always been told, like, I always connect with a lot of people, and that's why I love student leadership. And, voting is a big part of our lives. And, some people may think that they held back voting a little bit, but like, I think it's just all about, what I want to take with me. It's like, just remembering, like, how I connected with these people, and like how I made these long life friendships with them. And, I think that's what I hold dear to my heart, where it's just like, I was here for a reason, and, just want to build some kind of, kind of legacy of some sort. And I think it's really important.
Thank you. Ali?
Yes, so I'm hoping in the future to get into environmental science and policy. So I'm very futuristic oriented. I really focus on what's going to come up next and what the next step is in being sustainable in those initiatives. I also would like to take from this experience new communication skills and public speaking. I'm not new to being up on stage in front of people, but I am new to making genuine connections with people and being super vulnerable up on stage, because that's what captures the attention of people when they're watching you, and it's going to inspire them to act on themselves and really make a difference in their own communities.
Thank you. Last, Esther?
Yeah, so I am actually Native American. I come from the Lower Sioux Dakota tribe, the Bedewakanton tribe in Minnesota. So I also worked with Native votes during the last election. And next year I'll be going to law school, hoping to go on to like criminal law with the Native American community. And so kind of what I'm taking away is the power of people being able to vote. You know, people in my community, my grandma wasn't allowed to vote until later in her life. And so I have this amazing privilege and an honor to be able to play an active role in society and put people in positions where they represent change, they represent the future. And, you know, we've seen in the last election, we had the first ever Native American woman in the Minnesota State Senate who was able to pass an historic bill that allowed for a missing and murdered Indigenous relatives office to be created. And there's just amazing things that are able to happen. And so what I'm taking into my future is to believe in kind of the impossible, the things that have never happened before, because
I always like to give it a minute. That was so good. All right, I'm sure Esther will join us here soon. All right, so our last question comes to what can we do better, right? So how can staff—
when it comes to environmental change.
All right, here we go. So how can staff, faculty, staff, and administrators better support students doing voter registration, voter education, and voter engagement on our campuses? What advice do you have for our staff, faculty, and students? All right, staff, faculty, and administrators, sorry. And we'll start with Rose.
Yeah, so I think first recognizing that you're in a position where you have access to students and to their attention. And that's not necessarily everyone on campus. A lot of times student groups have trouble getting people to show up, but as staff and faculty and administrators, you're kind of essential to everyday functions for students. So there are a couple of different things that we recommended to faculty who wanted to help out. One of the options was to notate on the syllabus when National Voter Registration Day was, and to also write about election day, write about voter registration deadlines, if that's something that you think students might find important. So that was the first thing, was syllabus. Another thing that they could do is ask students if they're registered to vote. I know that some professors at our university offered extra credit, which was especially motivating to students. So that's another way that you can just make sure that people know that you prioritize voting, because if you prioritize voting, they will in turn understand that it is important to be a voter. And then a final way that you can encourage students to vote is by sending out emails, especially administrators. You have a very unique power that you can use and take advantage of to communicate with students in this way.
Thank you, Rose. Pierre?
So I think the biggest lesson is that, we don't, there's no replacement for in person, and, of why voting matters. And, it's just a lot to, sharing technical information on, how to vote, and just to, motivate people to impact the issues in our community. And, it's just like having keeping that same dialogue, but just like kind of like on a different on a different level. And I'm very specialized in tech, and I can really help out in the future, how we can support students by using how to use tech while they vote. So
yeah, using your skills. Thank you so much. Allie?
Yes, so what I would like to see, I'm going to revisit meeting students where they're at. I would like to see more class reps and in-class engagement, even just a couple minutes. It could be in the Zoom class, or what I would love to see is things on D2L. It's a little bit different than getting an email sent because some students don't check all of their emails, but D2L is something they continuously have to check for their classes. I would also like to see more peer-to-peer support, whether it be incentivized or from student leadership. I have found that students really like to listen to other students and hear about their problems and what they're doing to make changes. I think that's a lot more inspiring than just administrators talking to students. And I would also like to see more voter education involvement, especially around the week before Election Day or the Monday or Tuesday of Election Day. I think those are really valuable because you can show up at the election center and register there. But knowing why you want to vote and what really pushes you to get there is really important information, especially from educational institutions. And thank you.
Thank you, Allie. SJ, so as you probably have figured out, we've moved on to the last question here. So just as a reminder for you, we're looking about how can staff, faculty, and administrators better support the voter registration, voter education, and voter engagement on our campuses.
Yeah, sorry, I dropped out there. So I just really want to stick with this question to voter education. I think that as someone who myself felt very uneducated in how to register to vote, where to go, how to do it, because students are also so transitional in where they're living. Here at Hamlin, if you cross over our main road, you vote at 2 different locations. And so there's like not even one location, and I'm sure that's way bigger at the U of M that as well. But not having one unified just makes it, complicated for students. And so engaging with them in that and allowing for opportunities for students to show up and literally come to a table at our, our main hall and just be like, okay, where do I go? What do I do? So we will literally walk people over, and we have professors and faculty who are there the day of voting and who are just like, okay, where are you from? Where's your address? Where can you vote? Stuff like that. But one of the coolest things that we did this last year is for voter education is faculty helped us create these information sheets of what the 2 ballots look like at our 2 local locations. And we had, for each candidate on the ballot, we had QR codes that, students could just scan and it would take directly to the campaign's website. And that allowed students to not only take time to understand, but when people take time to understand, they become invested in the process. And so that makes them more likely to turn out and vote that day than other times. And so we really focus on voter education, and we did those tablings a few different times. And that was a really big way for faculty to help educate, and also just engaging with professors around topics that are super pertinent. So our environmental studies classes, our food scarcity classes, stuff like that, that allowed us to be like, okay, what candidates, what are some policies that are up for debate and up for stuff like that. And it really helps students feel like they're a part of the process. And so when it came to registering to vote, there was no question that they needed to exercise that right.
Thank you so much. Folks, deep gratitude to LeadMN for bringing this panel together and allowing us to learn from each other. I feel so inspired to continue this important work here at the University of St. Thomas and to continue to connect with the Minnesota community to get all of our young students out to vote. If you have further questions for these panelists, LeadMN will do a share of their contact information after the event so that you're able to connect with them. Thank you so much for having us.
Great. Thank you, Manuela, and to our amazing student leaders for that great conversation. Today, LeadMN released the State of Student Voting Report, synthesizing data from the National Study of Learning, Voting, and Engagement out of Tufts University. This report found that in 2020, 70% of Minnesota's 269,797 eligible college students turned out to vote. That was an 8-point increase in student voter turnout in Minnesota from the 2016 election. In fact, Minnesota students voted at a higher rate than the general elected of 30 different states. The report also highlights some of the barriers and opportunities around student voting and spotlights best practices in voter engagement from campuses across the state. To view the full report, you can go to LeadMN.org. Now the fun part. I'm going to pass it over to LeadMN's Vice President, David Mesta, to announce the winners of the 2020 Democracy Cup. David, take it away.
Thank you, Mike. First, I'd like to award the Democracy Cup to the Community and Technical College with the highest voting rate. The award goes to Inver Hills Community College with a voting rate of 71.8%. Congratulations to Inver Hills for winning this huge trophy. Next, for the Democracy Cup to the private college with the highest voting rate, the award goes to St. Olaf College with a voting rate of 87.6%. Congrats, St. Olaf. Now, on to the public state university with the highest voting rate. Democracy Cup goes to Winona State University with a voting rate of 73.8%. Congratulations, Winona State. Lastly, to the public university with the highest voter rate, the Democracy Cup goes to the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, with a voting rate of 80.6%. Congrats, U of M, Twin Cities. Additionally, there were several Minnesota campuses and individuals who won national awards for voting at the All-In Campus Democracy Challenge award ceremony last month. We want to take a moment to recognize these as well. Inver Hills Community College was awarded with the highest voter turnout of any community college in the nation. Congratulations again to Inver Hills. St. Olaf was awarded with the highest voter turnout of any private college and overall any four-year institution in the nation. Congratulations, St. Olaf. The Standout President Award was given to Hamlin University President Finese Miller. Congratulations and thank you for your commitment to civic engagement, President Miller. Lastly, congratulations to our very own staff member at LeadMN, Jocelyn Roof, our communications coordinator, who was named to the Student Voting Honor Roll for her work when she was a student at the University of Iowa. Now, I'm going to pass things back over to Mike to close the event.
Once again, congratulations to all the winners and to all of you who've worked hard to engage students on your campus in the voting process in 2020. As we look ahead to 2022, LeadMN is planning to convene a statewide voting coalition group to meet every few months to discuss student voting best practices, network, and share ideas and opportunities for collaboration. You'll be receiving a follow-up email from us shortly, which will include information about how to get involved. Again, thank you very much for participating, and congratulations to all the winners. Have a great day.